Until the end of the 18th century, one of the main stagecoach routes from London to the wilds of southwest England left Salisbury by way of Harnham Hill and on to the Shaftesbury Drove, where even today the thunder of horses' hooves can still be heard, as the old highway is now part of the Salisbury Racecourse.
Second, number 34, Cricket Bat. Third, number 37, Savar. Fourth horse, number 31. Official time of the winning horse is 1 minute, 15.41 seconds. 1 minute, 15.41 seconds.
Even though it is the Grave Memorial.
No, he can't. No, come in. He can't. Right length. How different from those far-off days, when the only sound would be the clatter of a passing coach, then silence. The first 8 miles of the Herra path was marked by trees planted at the appropriate distance. These became known as the 1 mile tree, the 2 mile tree, and so on. Further along, when the milestones took over, they only said how far it was from Hyde Park Corner, as no one knew what lay ahead. What a welcome sight this must have been, the resting stage at the Fovant Hut. Here now stands a grey 2-storey house, open to all the wind and storms that sweep down from Salisbury Plain. The locals from the village below used to come here to stand and stare at the strangers from London, with their pale faces, refined clothes and powdered wigs. On across Swallowcliff Down and Middle Down, to the trees standing high on Anstey Hill. The route stretches out across the downs till it reaches the top of White Sheet Hill and the last remaining milestone. Then came the treacherous descent of the hill, which could take many hours if the chalk pathway was wet and slippery. At the foot of the hill was the Glove Inn, the hostelry for the night. This is now Arundel Farm, and the ancient highway can still be seen passing the front door, and the old bell to summon the travellers to their coach still hangs on the wall. While the stage moves off westward, to the south a Roman road leads to the highest point of these chalk hills. Wyn Green, with its crown of beech trees, caught in winter's grip. From here, an even older trackway, the Ox Drove, leads back towards London, along the downlands parallel to the Ridgeway. This was the route used by the drovers to move their cattle and sheep across the country. Drove now joins the traffic-laden main road and descends to the village of Coombe Bissett, split in two by the Salisbury-Blandford Road. We have now completed a full circuit of the old highways that encompass these chalk downs. But what secrets lie in the valley beneath these rolling hills? A valley that man seems to have passed by in his endeavour to get to other places faster and noisier than ever before, where still on any village green the summer sound of bat and ball and a winter mist seen from the hilltop seems to veil this valley in secrecy. As the sun filters through, it illuminates a distant clock tower and lights up the old cottages of a tiny hamlet in this sleepy, tranquil valley. The mists of morning still lie thick, but already a pre-dawn glow gives new life to a dying elm in a valley that has truly remained a part of old England. Elms and willows grace the little river Ebble, which flows through the valley, and following it upstream, the dreamy little hamlet of Stratford Tony, the first of many charming villages that nestle along its fertile banks. footpath beneath Stratford Tony Down leads to the first of the manor houses dotted along the valley, Throop Manor Farm. No, beware of the dog sign here, but beware of the gibbon, whose cage stands guard at the gateway. Through an old orchard and into the parish of Bishopstone. Opposite the church is this wonderful example of a cob wall. Being very suspect to the elements, it must keep its head and feet dry. Hence the thatched roof and flint stone base. The thatchers were making an excellent repair job. The village used to be situated around the church until the plague was brought to the area. The surviving inhabitants burnt their cottages and moved further west, leaving nature to cover the remains of the old village. This tower is all that remains of the fortified house of Folston. The 200-year-old shop and post office used to be a bakery, using a unique wood-fired oven. From Bishopstone, the valley widens. To the south, a line of trees stretches along the skyline of Knighton Hill, while to the north, Hyden Hill, Hut Bottom, Little Down, Stoke Down and Netton Down all huddle together to shelter Stoke Farthing, nestling here in the valley. What lovely sounding names these are. It is surprising what can be found in a valley such as this. An old horse-driven milk float lies hidden away behind some farm buildings. The undergrowth creeps over the rusting chassis and decaying woodwork. But in the barn behind, an old Romany open-lot caravan is being restored to its original colourful self. The traditional designs have been handed down by generations of travelling people. Horses' heads decorate the pan box, which will be fitted beneath the rear of the caravan. The van decorator's art is acquired through considerable experience, backed by much practice. This is apparent in the freehand vigour of the scrolling and panel lining. Confidence is essential, and it is said that even the best hand with a lining brush takes a pint or two to prepare him for the work. The inside of an open lot is decorated with flower motifs. The little bay window above the bed is a fairly recent innovation. It gives somewhere to put that early morning cup of tea. The ceiling is lined with a printed fabric, usually flowers, on a light background. According to their purse, most Romanys insisted on gold, and for gold leaf there is no substitute. A gold paint has not yet been invented that out of doors doesn't tarnish to a dull brown within a few weeks. Many a painted caravan or horse and cart can be seen travelling along these valley roads. The centre and heart of the valley is Broad Chalke. If a little downland valley has to have a capital, then this must surely be it. Set so deep in the shadow of Knoll Hill that the winter's sun hardly sees the village. But come spring and summer, then the winding street becomes a gem of English heritage, with cottages of thatch and cob, of weathered stone, and of country gardens. An old cow barn is now an artist's studio, for this is Reddish, the home of Cecil Beaton. A beautiful 17th century house with landscaped gardens that reach up the hillside behind and down to the chalk stream in front. The little church at Fifield Bavant is the second smallest in England, just 35 feet long and 15 feet wide. It is perched alone in a field on a grassy hill looking across this tiny hamlet. Fifield Bavant also has what must be one of the prettiest post boxes in the country. This Victorian box, set in the wall of the old rectory. There are very few houses here. This row of old cottages, whose gardens change colour with the passing seasons. Manor Farm and the old rectory, built in the 17th century, and has housed many rectors of the nearby parishes. It is said that Florence Nightingale once stayed here. Across the meadows, dappled with the gold of buttercups, to the banks of Marleycombe Hill, covered in a carpet of wild flowers. Beneath this colourful hillside lies Chalke, a village of quietude and unhurried living, with a history of ghostly legends and tales of scandalous deer poaching escapades by the village folk, who, if caught, were hanged here at Shepherd's Cross. Chalke has the story of an old lady who saved her family by sitting on a pot of cooking venison when the keepers unexpectedly called at her cottage. Gold is said to be buried near Apple Spill Bridge, and an old man with money bags chinking has followed anyone who ventures past this place at a certain hour of the night. Woodmington, last hamlet on this side of the valley. And in an old orchard, derelict farm implements rust away, discarded as more and more modern machinery takes over. And although the horse is hardly ever used now on the farm, it still plays an important part of valley life.
Spring comes to Wiltshire's lonely downland in a wonderful way. Yesterday was winter, cold and dark, but suddenly today the downs glisten a bright green in the sunlight. White clouds billow across a bright blue sky, chasing their shadows across the valley below. trees don their first garments of pale green. The fields. It is like opening a book of endless pages, with coloured illustrations on every page. There are the new green shoots of harvest, the clouds, the delicious sky and the wind, the sunlight which falls on the patchwork pattern of fields, stretching out endlessly.
One of the prettiest roads in the valley leads down from the Oxdrove, past East Combe Wood and the high roadside banks, where spring-born flowers grow amongst the tufted grass. Suddenly, on either side, the valley appears, stretching away into the distance. Into the shade of the trees, and the smell of wild garlic fills the air. A roadside cottage shows that this was the first meeting place of the Congregationalists in this village of Ebbsbourne Wake. An old country custom, dating from Shakespeare's day, is merry henting. This is to celebrate the end of sheep shearing, and here in Ebsbourne the tradition is carried on. The villagers, suitably disguised as sheep, run amok through the streets, chased by an exhausted shepherd. The children, also dressed accordingly, sing and dance through the village, accompanied with their own music. All this watched with much amazement and amusement. The traditional sheep roasting then takes place at the fete, with all its stalls and sideshows that go with these country fairs. A modern novelty is It's a Knockout between the villages along this secret valley. The hub of village life quite often centres on the local pub, and the Horseshoe at Ebsbourne is no exception. The bar holds a collection of country bric-a-brac that the landlord has collected over the years, and he is only too pleased to explain their use and origins.
This is an old farm implement that they used to use for thatching the haystacks. They used to make the bonds by crooking this into the stack and then walking backwards and twisting as they go, so that they made the bonds to go around the bottom and round the top of the rick to hold the thatch on. And this was normally, or quite often, a boy's job. This is an old wagon roller that the old carters used to use. It was connected on the back wagon wheel, so that when the horses was going up the hill, or a steep hill then, and they wanted to rest, this acted as a wedge, I suppose, to block the wheel up so that it wouldn't run back down the hill. This is what is known as a bucket crook, and it was given to me by a friend of mine over in the next valley near Wiley, and it was used years ago when cottagers' only water supply was from mostly rainwater tanks, and they used to use this when they lost a bucket and dropped it down into the tank, crooked the bucket on, and it was made this way so that once they crooked it on, the bucket couldn't come off.
When dusk falls, the lighted windows beckon one into the inn, to the warmth and atmosphere so typical of an English village pub.
Now wait for the start. Now wait for the start.
Have you a crayfish you can sell to me with a hey, hi, hey, hi, hey, hi, hey, with a hey, hi, hey, hi. Oh, yes, yes, the fish are very pretty by the sea. I have a crayfish I can sell to me with a hey, hi, hey, hi, hey, hi, hey, with a hey, hi, hey, hi,
Farming has now become more and more mechanised, so it is very unusual and interesting to find anyone content to harvest in the good old-fashioned way. Here in the shadow of Wyn Green is Underhill Farm, a picture postcard cottage where the clock turns back to a bygone era of harvesting. The golden stooks stand in regimented lines across the field, soon to be gathered in and stored in the barn until the arrival of the old-fashioned threshing machine. The wheat will then be turned into flour that makes the most delicious homemade bread, while the stalks will be used for thatching. Another aspect of farming in the valley is, of course, the dairy herd. Half a distance, or as locals just calls it, hell of a distance.
Yes, hell of a distance, but nobody knows from where. If remoteness from the modern world is intended, that is still true. For here, if anywhere, is a piece of old England. The Crown Inn certainly fits into that category, for it must be one of the quaintest of village pubs. At the other end of the scale, lying in extensive grounds, is this grand Queen Anne house, lived in by the nobility. The rooks were nesting in the tall trees of lovely Tower Farm, now given over to the breeding of racehorses. The tower was built in 1861. The clock still stands at 2, as it has for many years, a detail which scarcely seems to matter in such a timeless spot. Turning down the steep hill, the peace and quiet of the little village church in the fields is something tangible. Within the church lies the tomb of a knight in armour. He was a member of one of the oldest families in England, the Gorwins, who lived at the house called Norrington, now a farm, reached by a long winding track round the foot of Windmill Hill with its tuft of trees. This wonderful secluded manor house looks as if it has grown in the valley with the trees and hills. The farm buildings are in keeping with the period, with their heavy oak beams. There is a small lake encircled by trees. It is incredible to believe that this delightful pool dries up in the summer. Also the little river Ebble, meandering out of it like a silver thread across the fields to Alvediston. Beyond the fields is a quiet place, undisturbed by hand of man, and with the air of another generation, where the ancient willows are allowed to grow as they wish. The Ebble whispers and trickles through, at one in spirit. For it is in no hurry to bicker down the 13 tortuous miles through the valley to join the brimming river Avon. Indeed, it could say with Tennyson's brook, with many a curve my banks I fret, by many a field and fallow, by many a fairy foreland set with willow weeds and mallow. Then out again I turn and flow to join the brimming river, for men may come and men may go, but I go on forever. But being a Wiltshire stream, it is more likely to understand that dialect.
Blow on, our little brook, so joyously and free. So full of little babblings gay, sweet will of purity. Blow on, our little stream, all down thy winding bed. I like to hear thy music sweet, with zurling larks o'erhead. Their charms lies in thy rippling wave, for aye 'tis sweet to hear, for as they seem to cheer me heart, and drive away me care. For as I stand upon thy bank, thou'rt wretched and forlorn, ya seems to say, don't brood o'er ills, they'll flee tomorrow morn. So little brook, in thee I find a lesson to suit I. Though stones and weeds beset your bed, yet goes on merrily. And though these ills beset me heart, and villain now we pain, sweet little brook, I'll think of thee, and never more complain.
Dries up in summer, it can equally flood in winter.
With so much ideal riding country around, there has always been the need for a blacksmith's forge. The old forge as it looked at the turn of the century, and still looking much the same today. Even today, you can sometimes see transport of an early part of the century going down the main street. Along the road to the post office is a delightful old cottage that from 1550 until 1800 was a clock factory, owned by a man called Monk. His ghostly knock is still heard on the front door. Now, a dear old couple live there, along with their many chiming clocks, so let them take up the story.
Gilbert was outside somewhere doing some of the flowers. Oh, I thought somebody at the door, because he never knocks the knocker. He knocks the wood part. But you didn't believe it, did you?
No.
You didn't believe it when we come there first. I know, well, we hadn't been there very long before there was a knock at the door. And my mother was very deaf, and she answered the door. I hardly heard it. But anyway, when I said so to the rector, he said, oh yes, that's what happens in that house. And he hadn't heard us, we hadn't seen him, nothing. And it's never at night, it's always in the daytime. But for about, I expect it's 20 years before Gilbert was out having a wash in the back part. And I heard a knock, but I was so well used to it that I went on doing my needlework in there, and I thought, oh, Monk. And he said, answer the door, somebody at the door. I said, no. He took me back, there was nobody here. Walked along to this one, which is a half glass door, the outside one. There's nobody here. I said, no, it was Monk. So he believed it after that, and that's about, we've been here 20 years then. Why didn't Rosie's got off here? Some of my photographs.
The church at Berwick holds much of interest, including this Crusader's tomb. Set in the floor of the nave is this memorial to John Gain, rector of the parish in the 18th century. Being a kindly man, he left a bequest that the great bell of the church be rung every winter's night to guide travellers who may have lost their way on the high downs that surround the village.
He left some money. Well, I suppose he left the house really up here, Curfewed House.
Yeah, it's Curfewed Cottage.
And the rent of the house was to be given to the man that rung the bell. The princely sum of £5 a year. Doesn't sound much now, but of course it was in those days. Because my old grandfather, my great grandfather, he used to ring it. And then all the boys that were coming on to learn ringing the bells, they one after another, didn't you?
He also undertook to keep the churchyard free from all weeds, stones and other annoyance. The ringing of the bell was only discontinued at the beginning of the last war. So, if ever you are lost on these hilltops, maybe the echo of a ghostly bell drifting across the years will guide you down to sanctuary. For the spirit of that vicar from a past century lives on into the present day through the kind, friendly people who dwell in this, the secret valley.